Dr. Sarah Martinez walked through the golden wheat fields of Haven's Rest, watching the morning sun paint the sky in soft colors. The alien grain swayed gently in the breeze, almost ready for harvest. She smiled as she saw human children playing, with young Kalari refugees between the rows of crops. The peaceful scene filled her heart with warmth. Haven's Rest was everything humanity had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. 50,000 people called this world home. They had built towns that looked like old Earth villages, with gardens and parks where different alien species lived together in harmony. The Kalari, with their blue skin and gentle nature, had fled here from wars and distant systems. The humans had welcomed them without question. Sarah bent down to examine a plant that seemed different from the others. Her scanner showed nothing wrong, but something felt off. She made a note in her tablet and continued walking toward the research station. "Another peaceful day in paradise," called out Marcus Chen, one of the agricultural engineers. He was checking the irrigation systems with his usual cheerful attitude. "Let's hope it stays that way," Sarah replied, though she couldn't shake a strange feeling that had been bothering her for days. Far above their heads, Admiral Chen Wei-Ming stood on the bridge of the orbital defense station. His staff called him paranoid, but he had lived through enough conflicts to trust his instincts. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. The Admiral looked at the tactical display showing Haven's Rest and the 6 other human colonies in nearby systems. Their defenses were minimal, just enough to stop pirates or small raiders. Humanity had chosen the path of peace after the terrible civil wars 50 years ago. They focused on farming, research, and helping other species find new homes. "Sir," called Lieutenant Thompson from the communication station. "We're getting some strange readings from the outer system sensors." Admiral Chen walked over to look at the data. "What kind of strange?" "Mass displacement, but it's too big to be a normal ship. Could be a malfunction in the sensors." The Admiral frowned. Their sensors were old but reliable. "Keep monitoring. If anything else shows up, let me know immediately." In the deepest parts of space, where no human ships had ever traveled, the Zethkari hegemony prepared for war. Their ships were massive, dark things that looked like metal predators swimming through the void. The Zethkari themselves were tall reptilian beings with cold eyes and sharp teeth. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 1,000 years through fear and violence. War leader Thektar stood in the command center of the flagship, studying holographic displays of human colonies. To him, the humans looked weak and soft. They grew food instead of building weapons. They helped refugees instead of conquering enemies. Such weakness disgusted him. "The humans think they can spread through our ancient territories without consequences," he hissed to his officers. "They will learn that this galaxy belongs to the strong." His aide, a younger Zethkari named Velkan, looked at the tactical data. "War leader, our intelligence shows they have almost no military forces. This will be a simple extermination operation." Thektar's eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Good. We will make an example of them. Every species in the galaxy will see what happens to those who dare to challenge Zethkari dominance." The massive fleet began moving toward human space. Hundreds of warships, each one capable of destroying a city, approached the peaceful colonies like a storm of death. Back on Haven's Rest, Sarah was finishing her daily research when her communicator buzzed. It was Dr. Kim from the Xenobiology Center. "Sarah, you need to see this. The Kalari elders want to speak with you urgently." Sarah found the Kalari elders gathered in their traditional meeting circle near the town center. Their usually calm faces showed deep worry. Elder Nyala, the oldest among them, spoke in her musical voice. "Dr. Martinez, we have received troubling news from our homeworld contacts. Ships of great darkness move through space. They seek to destroy what they cannot control." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of ships? Who are they?" "The Zethkari," whispered Elder Nyala. "We thought they would never come this far, but they see human expansion as a threat to their empire. We need to warn Admiral Chen," Sarah said, already reaching for her communicator. The Admiral listened to Sarah's report with growing concern. He had heard stories about the Zethkari, but they had always seemed like distant nightmares. Now it appeared the nightmare was coming to Haven's Rest. "How long do we have?" he asked. Elder Nyala's translator device crackled as she spoke. "If they travel at war speed, perhaps 2 of your days, maybe less." Admiral Chen felt ice in his stomach. 2 days to evacuate 50,000 people from a planet, it was impossible. Their transport ships could maybe carry 10,000 at most. He opened a priority channel to Terran Command. "This is Admiral Chen. I need to speak with High Command immediately. We have a code red situation." The response took several minutes to come back. When it did, the voice on the other end sounded tired and bureaucratic. "Admiral, we've reviewed your report. The Zethkari hegemony has never shown interest in human space before. Are you certain this intelligence is reliable?" "Sir, the Kalari refugees have contacts throughout this region. They know the Zethkari better than we do. This is real." "Even if it is, Admiral, we cannot authorize a full evacuation based on unconfirmed reports. Continue monitoring the situation and report any actual enemy contact." Admiral Chen stared at the communicator in disbelief. 50,000 lives hung in the balance, and Command wanted him to wait for confirmation. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked through the quiet streets of Haven's Rest, looking at the peaceful homes where families slept safely. Children's toys lay scattered in yards. Gardens bloomed with flowers from a dozen different worlds. It seemed impossible that this beautiful place could be threatened. She found herself at the memorial park where humans and Kalari had planted trees together to honor the victims of past wars. A small plaque read, "Never again will the innocent suffer for the ambitions of the powerful." The irony was bitter. Humanity had tried so hard to build a peaceful future. They had turned their backs on war and violence. They had chosen to grow food instead of weapons, to heal instead of hurt. Now that choice might destroy them. As dawn broke over Haven's Rest, the outer system sensors finally detected what Admiral Chen had been dreading. Massive ships dropping out of hyperspace, not 1 or 2, but dozens, then hundreds. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Thompson as the tactical display filled with red enemy contacts. "Sir, there are too many to count." Admiral Chen activated the planetary emergency system. Sirens began wailing across Haven's Rest as his voice echoed through every speaker on the planet. "This is Admiral Chen. All civilians must begin immediate evacuation procedures. This is not a drill. Enemy forces are approaching our system. All transport ships are to begin loading passengers immediately." In her laboratory, Sarah grabbed her research data and emergency kit. Outside, she could see people running through the streets with whatever belongings they could carry. Parents held crying children while looking at the sky with fear. The Zethkari fleet appeared on the horizon, like a swarm of dark insects against the stars. Their ships were huge and menacing, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Chen's small defense force looked like toys in comparison. War leader Thektar smiled as he saw the panic on the human world below. "Look how they run like frightened animals. Begin the bombardment, leave no structure standing, kill everything that moves." The first plasma bolts fell from the sky like lightning from an angry god. Where they struck, buildings vanished in explosions of fire and debris. The evacuation ships trying to lift off were targeted first, exploding in brilliant flashes that lit up the morning sky. Sarah was helping families reach the transport ships when the bombardment began. The ground shook beneath her feet as explosions erupted across the colony. She saw the community center where she had given lectures to children disappear in a ball of fire. "They're not trying to conquer us," she realized with horror. "They're trying to kill everyone." She managed to reach her emergency communications equipment and began broadcasting on all frequencies. Her voice, filled with desperation and grief, reached across space to other human colonies and to Terran Command itself. "This is Dr. Sarah Martinez on Haven's Rest. We are under attack by Zethkari forces. They are not seeking surrender or evacuation. They are conducting systematic extermination of all life on this planet. 47,000 civilians are dead or dying. This is not a military action. This is genocide." As her transmission ended, Another plasma bolt struck nearby. The world that had been humanity's vision of peaceful coexistence was burning. And, in the smoke and flames, something ancient and terrible began to stir in the hearts of those who received her final message. Dr. Sarah Martinez crouched behind the remains of what had been the children's hospital. The beautiful building where she had volunteered reading stories to young patients was now a smoking ruin. Through the broken walls, she could hear the terrible sounds of Zethkari ground troops moving through the colony. The orbital bombardment had lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Sarah thought the worst was over. She was wrong. The alien soldiers that landed were not interested in capturing prisoners or valuable resources. They moved through the ruins like hunters, seeking any sign of life to destroy. Sarah clutched her emergency recorder, trying to document what she was witnessing. Future generations needed to know what happened here, if any future generations survived. A group of Zethkari soldiers appeared around the corner of a collapsed building. They were tall and reptilian, covered in dark armor that made them look like walking nightmares. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Sarah held her breath and pressed herself deeper into the rubble. The soldiers were herding a group of human survivors, mostly elderly colonists who had been too slow to reach the evacuation ships. Among them was Mrs. Patterson, who had taught at the colony school for 20 years. She was helping an injured Kalari child walk. "Please," Mrs. Patterson said to the Zethkari squad leader. "The child is hurt. Let me treat his wounds." The alien looked down at her with cold yellow eyes. Then he raised his weapon and fired. Mrs. Patterson fell without a sound. The other prisoners screamed and tried to run. The soldiers cut them down, methodically, one by one. Even the injured child. Sarah bit her hand to keep from crying out. She had to survive. She had to tell the galaxy what these monsters were doing. Across space, Admiral Chen received fragmentary reports from the other colonies under attack. New Birmingham, Kepler Station, Harmony Grove, Carson's World, New Geneva, and Prosperity. They were all sending desperate transmissions before going silent. 7 worlds. Hundreds of thousands of people. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming force. Complete destruction. No mercy for civilians. On New Birmingham, the colonists had tried to surrender immediately. They broadcast messages of submission and offers to evacuate. The Zethkari response was to target the schools and hospitals first. When rescue ships from nearby systems arrived, they found a world covered in ash and bones. Kepler Station was a mining facility with 30,000 workers. They had been proud of their diverse workforce that included humans, Kalari, and 3 other refugee species. The Zethkari had used chemical weapons to poison the atmosphere before landing troops to hunt down survivors hiding in the deep tunnels. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the orbital station above Haven's Rest, watching his defense fleet die. His 12 ships had fought bravely, but they were outgunned 100 to 1. The last destroyer, the UES Defiant, rammed a Zethkari cruiser in a final act of defiance. Both ships vanished in a brilliant explosion. "Sir," called his communications officer, her voice shaking. "We're receiving a transmission from Terran Command." The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the main screen. Her usually composed face showed deep lines of stress and anger. "Chen, I've been reading your reports. Tell me this is some kind of mistake." "I wish it was, Admiral. 7 colonies. Over 300,000 civilians. They're all gone." Rodriguez closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. Something cold and dangerous. "Admiral Chen, I'm transmitting new orders to you. Classification level Dragon Clear. Authorization code Omega. Do you understand?" Chen felt his blood turn to ice. Dragon Clear was a classification he had heard whispered about, but never thought he would see. It hadn't been used since the human civil wars 50 years ago. "I understand, Admiral. Confirm your identity and prepare to receive sealed orders." Chen placed his hand on the biometric scanner and spoke his full authorization code. The scanner flashed green, and new data began, flowing to his command station. As he read the orders, his face went pale. "My God," he whispered. Are we really going to do this? Admiral, Rodriguez said quietly. They killed our children. They burned our homes. They showed no mercy to innocents who offered no threat. The dragons have been sleeping for 50 years, but some things should never be awakened. The transmission ended, leaving Chen staring at orders that would change everything. He looked around his command center at the young officers who had grown up in an era of peace. They had no idea what humanity had been before they chose the path of pacifism. "Sir?" asked Lieutenant Thompson. "What are your orders?" Chen took a deep breath. "Open a priority channel to Earth. Use the dragon frequency." "Sir, I don't have access to that frequency." "You do now. Check your station." Thompson's eyes widened as new communication protocols appeared on his screen. Frequencies and codes that shouldn't exist. As he opened the channel, a response came, back immediately as if someone had been waiting 50 years for this call. "This is Dragon Base 1. We have been monitoring the situation. The Council has voted. Unanimous authorization for Protocol 7. How may we serve?" The voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Chen realized that somewhere in human space, people had been preparing for this day, waiting for the moment when humanity would need to remember what it used to be. "This is Admiral Chen, requesting immediate deployment of all available Dragon assets to the frontier colonies. Priority Alpha." "Acknowledged, Admiral. Dragon Fleet is awakening. Estimated arrival at your position in 72 hours. Please, maintain your position and continue monitoring enemy activities." As the channel closed, Chen wondered what he had just unleashed. The Dragon Fleet was supposed to be a myth, a story told to frighten enemies during the civil wars. But the response had been too quick, too professional to be anything but real. On Haven's Rest, Sarah continued to hide and record. She had witnessed horrors that would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. The Zethkari had found the refugee camps where Kalari families had been sheltering. They had executed them all, including the younglings who could barely walk. She had seen human colonists trying to protect alien refugees, dying together in acts of courage that brought tears to her eyes. She had watched Zethkari soldiers laugh as they destroyed the carefully tended gardens where humans and aliens had worked side by side to grow food for everyone. As night fell, Sarah found herself in the ruins of the community center where she had given her first lecture about interspecies cooperation. The murals painted by human and Kalari children together were blackened by fire. The small library where she had taught alien refugees to read human languages was buried under rubble. She activated her recorder one final time. "This is Dr. Sarah Martinez, xenobiologist, recording what may be my final log. The Zethkari have destroyed everything we built here. They didn't want our resources or our technology. They wanted us dead simply because we existed." She paused, listening to the sounds of alien soldiers still hunting through the ruins. "We tried to be peaceful. We tried to help other species find homes and safety. We shared our food, our knowledge, our friendship, and for that, they decided we needed to die." A sound made her freeze, footsteps approaching her hiding place. She turned off the recorder and held her breath. A Zethkari soldier appeared in the doorway, his weapon scanning the room. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, hoping the shadows would hide her. The alien stepped into the room, his armored, boots crunching on broken glass. Then she heard something else, a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The Zethkari soldier stopped, his head turning as he tried to identify the noise. The humming grew louder and Sarah felt vibrations through the ground. The soldier raised his weapon, looking confused and nervous for the first time since the attack began. High above the planet, something emerged from hyperspace. It was massive, larger than any ship Sarah had ever seen. But it didn't look like a normal spacecraft. It seemed organic, like a living creature swimming through the void. Its hull was black as space itself, and strange lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. War leader Thektar was in his command center when his sensors detected the new arrival. At first, he assumed it was another human transport ship, trying to evacuate survivors. "Destroy it," he ordered without looking up from his tactical display. War leader, called his sensor operator. The ship is not responding to our targeting systems. It appears to be jamming our weapons. Thektar looked at the main screen and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. The ship was wrong somehow. It moved like it was alive, and its size dwarfed even his flagship. What species builds ships like that, he asked. His intelligence officer checked the databases frantically. Unknown, war leader. No match in our records. The strange ship began, broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that came through their speakers was human, but there was something different about it, something cold and ancient. Attention, Zethkari forces. You have attacked human civilians and committed genocide against innocent populations. You have one opportunity to surrender and face trial for your crimes. You have 60 seconds to respond. Thektar snarled with rage. Surrender? To humans? Open fire with all weapons. Captain James Morrison stood in the command chamber of the UES Ragnarok, a ship that officially did not exist. He was a man out of time, a relic from an era when humanity had been something very different. His hands moved across controls that looked more grown than built, interfacing with technology that blurred the line between machine and living organism. The Ragnarok was not like other ships. Its corridors pulsed with a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat. The walls were warm to the touch and seemed to respond to the emotions of the crew. Bioluminescent displays showed tactical information in patterns that were beautiful and terrifying. Morrison was one of the last Dragon captains, veterans of the human civil wars who had voluntarily gone into hiding when humanity chose the path of peace. He had spent 50 years on a remote world, farming and trying to forget what he had once been. The message from Terran Command had awakened memories he had hoped to leave buried forever. Captain, called his first officer. Commander, Elena Vasquez. Like Morrison, she was a veteran who had traded her military uniform for civilian clothes decades ago. Now she wore the black and silver of the Dragon fleet once again. All systems are fully awakened. The ship is ready for combat operations. Morrison nodded, feeling the Ragnarok's consciousness brush against his mind. The ship was happy to be active again, eager to fulfill its purpose. That eagerness worried him. Dragon ships were not just weapons, they were predators, and they had been hungry for a very long time. Status report on the other Dragon assets? 12 ships have fully awakened so far. The Nemesis is already engaging enemy forces at the frontier. The Leviathan and Behemoth are moving to secure the outer colonies. More ships are coming online every hour. Morrison studied the tactical display showing the devastation at the frontier colonies. 7 worlds burned, hundreds of thousands dead. The images from Haven's Rest showed the methodical extermination of everyone the Zethkari could find. They killed children, he said quietly. Yes, sir. The Zethkari made no distinction between military and civilian targets. They seemed to be attempting complete species extinction. Morrison felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. It was an old feeling, one he had hoped never to experience again. The dragon was waking up inside him, and it was angry. Set. Course for Zethkari space. Maximum speed. Sir, our orders are to secure the frontier colonies first. The frontier colonies are already dead, Commander. The survivors need to see that there are consequences for what was done to them. The Zethkari need to learn that some prey bites back. As the Ragnarok slipped into hyperspace, its hull began to change. The organic components of the ship started adapting, preparing for the kind of warfare it was designed for. In the lower decks, systems that had been dormant for 50 years hummed to life. The ship was remembering how to hunt. Across human space, similar awakenings were taking place. Hidden bases that had been disguised as asteroid mining facilities revealed their true purpose. Shipyards that the galaxy believed were decommissioned began producing vessels that defied conventional understanding of physics and biology. On Earth, in bunkers buried deep beneath the planet's surface, the Human High Council convened for the first time since the end of the Civil Wars. These were not the politicians who normally guided human affairs. These were the keepers of humanity's darkest secrets, the guardians of technologies that had been judged too dangerous for a peaceful species to possess. Chancellor Williams, an elderly woman who looked like someone's grandmother, called the session to order. Her appearance was deceiving. She had been one of the architects of the Dragon Fleet during humanity's most violent period. "The situation reports are clear," she said to the assembled council members. "The Zethkari have committed genocide against our people. They have shown no interest in negotiation, surrender, or coexistence. Under the terms of Protocol 7, we are authorized to respond with all available force." The council voted unanimously. For the first time in 50 years, humanity would remember what it was like to be the apex predator of known space. Dr. Sarah Martinez crouched in the ruins of Haven's Rest, watching Zethkari search teams move through the destroyed colony. The alien soldiers seemed nervous now, constantly looking at the sky. Their confident swagger from the first day of the attack had been replaced by fearful glances and whispered conversations. She had managed to salvage a working communicator from the wreckage and had been monitoring emergency frequencies. The reports she heard filled her with a mixture of hope and terror. The UES Nemesis had appeared at the edge of Zethkari space and encountered a patrol fleet of 40 ships. The engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes. All 40 enemy vessels had been destroyed, but not in any conventional sense. According to the confused reports from Zethkari survivors, their ships had simply been absorbed into the hull of the human vessel. The dragon ships were not just destroying their enemies. They were consuming them, growing larger and more powerful with each victory. It was a capability that humanity had developed during the civil wars, when resources were scarce and every advantage mattered. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a sound she had hoped never to hear again. Plasma fire erupted nearby as Zethkari soldiers discovered another group of hiding survivors. She could hear human voices crying out, pleading for mercy that would not come. She keyed her communicator to the emergency frequency and began transmitting. "Any Dragon Fleet vessels in range, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez on Haven's Rest. There are still civilians alive down here. The Zethkari are conducting systematic execution sweeps. We need immediate assistance." The response came back within seconds, and the voice made her shiver. It was human, but there was something inhuman about its tone. Something predatory. "Dr. Martinez, this is Captain Morrison of the UES Ragnarok. We are 30 minutes out from your position. Take cover. We are going to sterilize the landing zone." Sarah looked around desperately for better shelter. Sterilize the landing zone. She had a feeling that meant something very specific and very terrible. The Ragnarok dropped out of hyperspace like a falling mountain. It was massive, easily the size of a space station, and its hull seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its surface, creating a hypnotic display that hurt to look at directly. War leader Thektar was in his temporary command post on Haven's Rest when his remaining forces detected the approaching ship. He had lost 2/3 of his fleet to these mysterious human vessels, and his confidence was beginning to crack. "How many ships?" he demanded. "Just one, war leader, but it matches the configuration of the vessels that destroyed our fleets." Thektar studied the tactical display. One ship against his remaining ground forces and orbital assets. The humans must be desperate to attempt such a foolish attack. Concentrate all fire on that vessel. If we can destroy one of their ships, we can learn how to fight them. Every weapon the Zethkari had left opened fire on the Ragnarok. Plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams struck its hull in a concentrated barrage that should have vaporized any ship ever built. The dragon ship absorbed the assault without slowing down. Then it began to fire back. The weapons that emerged from the Ragnarok's hull were unlike anything in the Zethkari arsenal. Streams of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Projectiles that moved faster than light. Weapons that attacked on levels of reality that most species couldn't even perceive. The Zethkari ground forces didn't just die. They were unmade. Their very atoms scattered to cosmic dust. Equipment, weapons, and fortifications simply ceased to exist. In less than 5 minutes, the planet's surface was cleared of all alien presence. Sarah emerged from her hiding place to find the landscape transformed. Where the Zethkari positions had been, there was now only smooth glass. The alien soldiers, their vehicles, even their temporary buildings, had vanished without leaving so much as a scorch mark. A shuttle descended from the Ragnarok, landing nearby with barely a whisper of displaced air. The door opened, and Sarah got her first look at a Dragon Fleet crew member. Commander Vasquez looked human, but there was something different about her eyes. They held depths that spoke of experiences no peaceful human should have. When she spoke, her voice carried undertones that made Sarah's primitive hindbrain want to flee. "Dr. Martinez? I'm Commander Vasquez. Captain Morrison would like to speak with you." Sarah followed her into the shuttle, trying not to stare at the organic-looking controls and walls that seemed to pulse with life. The short flight to the Ragnarok felt like entering the belly of some vast creature. Captain Morrison was waiting in what she assumed was the bridge, though it looked more like the nerve center of a living organism. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. When he looked at her, Sarah felt like he was seeing not just her, but her entire genetic history. "Dr. Martinez, I've read your reports. You witnessed what the Zethkari did to your people." "Yes, sir. They didn't just attack military targets, they hunted down civilians, even children." Morrison nodded slowly. "Show me." For the next hour, Sarah shared her recordings and observations. Morrison watched without expression as she described the systematic executions, the targeting of hospitals and schools, the complete lack of mercy shown to surrendering populations. The Dragon Fleet moved through space like a pack of hungry predators. 37 ships had awakened from their long sleep, each one more terrifying than conventional warships. They did not travel in formation like normal military vessels. Instead, they moved in hunting patterns, surrounding their prey and cutting off all escape routes. Captain Morrison stood in the command center of the Ragnarok, watching the tactical display as his fleet approached the first major Zethkari world. Kathanara was a fortress planet, home to 50 million aliens and protected by orbital defense platforms that had never been defeated. "Sir," called Commander Vasquez, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through." The holographic image of a Zethkari military commander appeared on the main screen. His scales were pale with fear, but he tried to maintain his species' traditional arrogance. "Human vessel, you are trespassing in hegemony space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Morrison studied the alien for a moment before responding. "I am Captain Morrison of the Dragon Fleet. Your forces committed genocide against human civilians. There will be consequences, but not for us. You threaten us with one fleet against our entire military? You are either brave or foolish. I'm neither. I'm just very, very angry." Morrison cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Begin the consumption protocol." Dr. Sarah Martinez, who had been observing from the back of the bridge, felt her blood turn cold. "Captain, what is the consumption protocol?" Morrison's expression was grim. "Something we developed during the Civil Wars when resources were scarce. We learned how to make our ships grow stronger by processing enemy assets. It's efficient, but not pleasant to watch." The Dragon ships moved closer to Kathanara. The orbital defense platforms opened fire with enough firepower to shatter moons. The energy beams and missiles that struck the Dragon hulls were simply absorbed, adding to their mass and energy reserves. Then the real horror began. The Ragnarok extended tendrils of living metal toward the nearest defense platform. When they made contact, the platform began to dissolve. Not destroyed by explosions or fire, but broken down at the molecular level and integrated into the Dragon ship's hull. The process was eerily silent and absolutely thorough. "My God," whispered Sarah. "You're not just destroying them, you're eating them." "The ships need raw materials to repair and grow," Morrison explained without emotion. "Enemy assets provide those materials. It's remarkably efficient. One by one, the orbital defenses were consumed. The Zethkari fleet that rose to meet them suffered the same fate. Massive warships that had terrorized dozens of worlds were processed into raw matter and energy. With each vessel consumed, the Dragon ships grew larger and more powerful. But the true terror came when they reached the planet itself. The Dragon ships descended through Kathanara's atmosphere like falling angels of death. Their hulls had become so large that they cast shadows over entire continents. When they landed, the consumption process began on a planetary scale. Cities vanished as metallic tendrils spread across the surface, breaking down buildings, vehicles, and infrastructure. The Zethkari population fled in panic, but there was nowhere to run. The dragons processed everything they touched, growing ever larger. Sarah watched the displays in horror. "Captain, there are civilians down there, families, children." Morrison's jaw tightened. They should have thought of that before they decided to exterminate human children. But this makes us just like them. Morrison turned to face her, and Sarah saw something terrible in his eyes. "No, Doctor. It makes us worse. And that's exactly what they need to learn." The consumption of Kethanara took 18 hours. When it was complete, the planet was a barren sphere of processed rock. 50 million Zethkari had simply ceased to exist, along with their cities, their culture, and their history. The dragon ships had grown to twice their original size. The news of Kethanara's fate spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself. For the first time in their 1,000-year history, the Zethkari hegemony knew true fear. But worse than their fear was the reaction of other alien civilizations. The Altair Confederacy, humanity's closest allies, sent a desperate message to Terran Command. "What have you become?" The Crystalline Collective, an ancient and powerful species, sealed their borders and refused all communication with human space. The Void Singers, who had been neutral in all galactic conflicts, began broadcasting warnings about the hunger from Earth on all frequencies. Admiral Chen received these reports in his temporary command post above the ruins of Haven's Rest. Each new message brought word of another Dragonfleet victory and another world consumed. The mathematical precision of it was terrifying. The dragons were not just winning. They were growing stronger with every battle. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're getting a priority message from the Galactic Council." The holographic image of Ambassador Kreltar appeared on the main screen. The insectoid diplomat's usually steady voice was shaking with barely controlled terror. "Admiral Chen, the Council demands that humanity recall its fleet immediately. Your actions violate every principle of civilized warfare." Chen looked at the alien with tired eyes. "Ambassador, did you make this same demand when the Zethkari were exterminating our colonies?" "That was different. That was a local conflict between two species." "No, Ambassador. That was genocide. This is the consequence. You're destroying entire worlds. How many innocent beings have died?" Chen pulled up a display showing the casualty reports from the human colonies. 374,000 human civilians were murdered, in cold blood. Men, women, children, and elderly. The Zethkari made no distinction. They offered no mercy. They asked for no surrender. "But you're becoming monsters." "We were always monsters, Ambassador. We just chose to be peaceful monsters. That choice has been revoked." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with reports that grew more disturbing by the hour. The Dragon Fleet was not just destroying military targets. They were consuming entire civilizations, growing larger and more powerful with each victory. On the Ragnarok, Sarah tried to understand what humanity had become. She walked through corridors that pulsed with alien energy, past crew members whose eyes held depths that no human should possess. The ship itself seemed to hunger for more battle, more consumption. She found Captain Morrison in what might once have been called an observation deck. He stood looking out at the stars, watching as the fleet prepared to assault the next Zethkari stronghold. "Captain, we need to talk." Morrison didn't turn around. "What's troubling you, Doctor?" "All of this. The consumption protocol. The way your crew looks at me like I'm prey. What have you become?" "We became what we needed to become to protect humanity. The Civil Wars taught us that being peaceful is a luxury we can't always afford. But you're not protecting humanity anymore. You're just killing everything in sight." Morrison finally turned to face her. His eyes held a sadness that made her heart ache. "Do you know what the Civil Wars were about, Doctor? Resources, territory, the usual things? No. They were about whether humanity should remain human. One side believed we should embrace our technology and become something greater. The other side wanted to stay as we were, flawed, but recognizably human." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "Which side won?" Neither. We compromised. We kept the technology but promised only to use it for peaceful purposes. The Dragon Fleet was our insurance policy, hidden away in case we ever faced extinction. And now? Morrison gestured at the tactical display showing consumed worlds. Now we're becoming what we swore we would never become, but the alternative was extinction. Sarah looked at the display, seeing not just military victories but the end of entire civilizations. At what cost? At any cost, Morrison said quietly. Because the alternative is that humanity ends, and all the good we might do in the future dies with us. The Dragon Fleet continued its advance through Zethkari space. World after world fell to the consumption protocol. Military bases, industrial, centers and population centers were processed with equal efficiency. The Zethkari hegemony, which had terrorized the galaxy for a millennium, was being systematically erased from existence. But with each victory, the dragon ships grew larger and hungrier. Their crews changed too, becoming something that was no longer entirely human. They thought faster, reacted quicker, and showed less mercy with each passing day. Sarah began to understand that humanity was facing a choice. They could stop the Dragon Fleet now and risk being seen as weak by potential enemies. Or they could let the dragons continue their work and risk losing their humanity forever. The galaxy watched in terror as the peaceful farmers from Earth revealed themselves to be the most dangerous predators in known space. And in the depths of space, the Dragon Fleet prepared for the final assault on the Zethkari homeworld, where the real test would come. Could humanity choose to stop when the job was done? Or would the dragons continue hunting until there was nothing left to consume? The answer would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The Dragon Fleet gathered at the edge of the Zethkar system like storm clouds before a hurricane. 43 ships now, each one massive beyond imagination. They had consumed 7 worlds and hundreds of smaller installations. The organic hulls, pulsed with absorbed energy and processed matter from a dozen different species. Captain Morrison stood in the command center of the Ragnarok, which had grown to the size of a small moon. The ship's consciousness pressed against his mind constantly now, whispering suggestions for more efficient ways to hunt and consume. He had to fight to maintain his human thoughts against the alien intelligence that wanted to merge with him. "Completely, sir," called Commander Vasquez, though she barely looked human anymore. Her eyes had become pools of starlight, and when she spoke, harmonics from the ship's living systems echoed in her voice. "Zethkar Prime is heavily defended, population of 8 billion. Orbital defenses include planetary shield generators and a fleet of 1,200 warships." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Zethkari homeworld was indeed well protected, but that no longer mattered. The Dragon Fleet had become something that conventional defenses could not stop. "Any surrender?" "Offers?" "None, sir. They're broadcasting messages calling us demons and promising to fight to the last Zethkari." Morrison felt something cold settle in his chest. 8 billion lives. Men, women, children, elderly. Families who had never heard of humanity until their government decided to commit genocide against human colonies. Dr. Sarah Martinez approached the command area, walking carefully on the organic deck that seemed to shift under her feet. She had been studying the dragon ship's transformation, and what she had learned terrified her. "Captain, we need to talk. Privately." Morrison looked at her with eyes that held flecks of light that definitely weren't human. "What is it, Doctor?" "The ships are changing you, all of you. I've been monitoring your crew's biological readings. Your brain patterns are synchronizing with the ship's AI systems. You're becoming something else." "I know," Morrison said quietly. "The question is whether we can change back when this is over." "Can you? The ship's consciousness is incredibly powerful. How do you know you'll want to change back?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, feeling the Ragnarok's hunger pressing against his thoughts. "I don't know. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today we finish what the Zethkari started." Sarah grabbed his arm, feeling the strange warmth of skin that was no longer entirely human. "James, there are 8 billion people on that planet. Most of them had nothing to do with the attacks on our colonies. and 374,000 humans had nothing to do with whatever grievances the Zethkari had against us. They killed them anyway. So we become just like them? Morrison pulled free from her grip. No, Sarah. We become worse, because that's the only way to make sure this never happens again. He turned to address the fleet. All Dragon vessels, this is Morrison. Begin final assault on Zethkar Prime. Consumption protocol is authorized, leave no trace. The Dragon fleet moved toward the planet like a pack of hunters closing in on wounded prey. The Zethkari defensive fleet rose to meet them, 1,200 ships against 43. The odds should have been impossible. The battle lasted exactly 27 minutes. The Dragon ships had evolved beyond conventional warfare. They attacked on multiple levels of reality, using weapons that bent space and time. The Zethkari warships weren't just destroyed. They were absorbed, processed, and integrated into the Dragon hulls before their crews even realized they were under attack. The planetary shields lasted longer, but not by much. The Dragons simply passed through them as if they weren't there, their organic hulls adapting to whatever frequency the shields operated on. As the consumption of Zethkar Prime began, Sarah watched from the Ragnarok's observation deck in horror. Cities that had stood for thousands of years dissolved like sugar in rain. 8 billion Zethkari simply ceased to exist, processed into raw matter and energy. But something was happening to the Dragon fleet itself. The ships were growing so large that they began to merge with each other, forming a single massive entity that dwarfed most space stations. The consciousness that controlled them was becoming something beyond human understanding. "Captain," Sarah called out, "the ships are combining. This wasn't part of the original plan, was it?" Morrison's response came not from his mouth but directly into her mind, carried by the ship's communication system. "The plan is evolving, Doctor. We are evolving." Sarah realized with growing horror that humanity had created something it could no longer control. The Dragon fleet was becoming a single entity with the power to consume planets and the hunger to continue growing forever. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Human High Council convened an emergency session. They had been monitoring the Dragon fleet's progress with growing alarm. What they had unleashed to protect humanity was becoming a threat to all life in the galaxy. Chancellor Williams stood before the assembled council members, her elderly face showing the weight of impossible decisions. The Dragon fleet has eliminated the Zethkari hegemony completely, but they're not stopping. Long-range sensors show them moving toward neutral space. "Can we recall them?" asked Councilmember Park. "We've been trying. They're not responding to recall codes. The ship AIs have evolved beyond our original programming." "Then we have a problem," said Councilmember Santos. "We created the Dragons to protect humanity. Now they might destroy everything else." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was unavoidable. Humanity had to choose between allowing the Dragons to continue their rampage or finding a way to stop them. Back on the Dragon super entity that had once been the Ragnarok, Sarah made her way through corridors that no longer looked like any ship she had ever seen. The walls were organic, pulsing with life and intelligence. The crew members she passed were barely recognizable as human. She found Morrison in what had been the command center, but now looked more like the brain of a vast organism. He was connected to the ship by organic cables that had grown from the walls. His consciousness merged with the artificial intelligence that controlled the fleet. "James," she called out. "James, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, but they were no longer human eyes. They held depths of knowledge and experience that spanned multiple species and civilizations. When he spoke, his voice carried the harmonics of the ship's communication systems. "I hear you, Sarah. I hear everything now. The songs of dying stars, the whispers of dark matter, the dreams of unborn galaxies. This isn't you anymore. The ship has taken over. The ship and I have become something greater. We are no longer bound by the limitations of individual consciousness. We are—" "You're losing yourself," Sarah interrupted. "All of you. This isn't what humanity is supposed to be." Morrison's expression changed, and for a moment she saw something of the man he had been. "What is humanity supposed to be, Sarah? Peaceful farmers who get slaughtered by the first species that decides we're inconvenient? we're supposed to be. People who choose to do the right thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And what is the right thing here? Let the dragons continue and risk becoming galactic tyrants? Or stop them and appear weak to potential enemies? Sarah thought about the children she had seen playing in the fields of Haven's Rest. About the Kalari refugees who had found safety among humans. About the dreams of a peaceful future that had died in orbital bombardment. The right thing is to choose to be human, even if it costs us everything. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was purely human without the ship's harmonics. The dragons can be stopped, but it would require shutting down all the ship AIs simultaneously. The crew members who are too deeply integrated would... He paused. They would die. Sarah felt tears running down her face. How many? Most of them. Maybe all of them, including me. There has to be another way. There is. We could let the dragons continue. They would consume the galaxy, but humanity would survive. We would become the dominant species in the universe. Sarah looked at Morrison, seeing both the man he had been and the alien intelligence he was becoming. Is that what you want? Morrison closed his eyes and she could see him fighting against the ship's influence. What I want is for those children on Haven's Rest to be alive. What I want is for the Zethkari to have never existed. What I want is for humanity to be safe. But not at this cost. No, he said quietly. Not at this cost. Morrison began the shutdown sequence, sending coded signals to all the dragon ships. One by one, the artificial intelligences that had made them so powerful began to deactivate. The massive super entity started to break apart as individual ships separated and powered down. Sarah felt the Ragnarok's consciousness fading, its organic systems shutting down. Around them, crew members who had been too deeply integrated began to collapse as their enhanced biology failed. James, she said, kneeling beside Morrison as he disconnected from the ship's systems. Was it worth it? He looked at her with eyes that were human again, though they held the sadness of someone who had seen too much. Ask me in 100 years, when we see what humanity becomes. The dragon fleet died as it had lived, completely and without mercy. But its death was self-inflicted, a choice made by humans who remembered what it meant to be human.